So today we are going to start and discuss another very important topic, which I believe is very pertinent from the point of view of mains 2024. And this is known as the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. Don't be afraid of such a large term. In short, you can simply call it as you can simply call it as AMOC. So this abbreviation I will be using time and again to spare you the difficulty in pronouncing this whole. But already what we will discuss in this while preparation of prelims and mains, it has a lot to do with the oceanic circulation, particularly oceanic currents. Now, what were oceanic currents? These are huge masses of water which include both surface circulation as well as the underwater circulation, deep water circulation, which travel over huge distances, and there are majorly of two types of currents, warm currents as well as cold currents, depending on the direction and the latitude from which they are traveling to and fro, and not depend upon the temperature. You have to remember this. So this is the basic thing. Now I'll also discuss. So the topic is it on the precipice of a collapse? So what do you understand by AMOC, or the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation? Is that it is a complex and integrated web or system of oceanic circulation which transports the warm salty water from the tropical Atlantic Ocean to the North Atlantic Ocean. Does any ocean current come into your mind related to this? Gulf Stream, North Atlantic Drift. It keeps the northwest European coast free of ice. Do you remember in climatology in class 11 geography part 1 physical geography? You normally have isotherms running towards in this direction where there is Norway and Sweden and Finland. So normally this current, the north, this Gulf Stream, this helps in keeping the temperatures moderate. Now, if you don't remember, I suggest you go and revise. So basically, we'll start with this. So these are two previous year questions because I've been following the trend. So in order to make it feasible or make it pertinent, to understand and relate what the trend UPSC is following. So these both of these questions were asked in GS paper 1. One was in mains 2022, which dealt with the directly with the forces influencing ocean currents. And this question, if you study the NCRT, you have sufficient points to answer this first part. The second part is a bit tricky. You need to have certain points. I'll not be discussing those right now, but you should have a habit, like in prelims, to go through the previous year question for mains. Okay. And second was in 2021, melting of the Arctic ice and Antarctic. How do they differ? Because Arctic, if I if you recollect or remember, Arctic is melting at an exponential rate which is much greater as compared to the Antarctic. And this is the reason, although we say that the overall temperature from the pre industrial times has risen to about 1.1 or 1.2 degrees, but the majority contribution of this rise, this is just the average, the majority composition or contribution is attributed to the northern latitudes, especially the Arctic. Okay, in India, for example, the average temperature rise is around 0.66 degrees Celsius. So it is less than the average. The Arctic is heating at more than the average, and this 1.1, when we arrive at, it is the cumulative average when we consider the various parts of the planet undergoing different rates or differences in the increase in temperature. So this is a lot of things are there: albedo, the landlocked nature, it is not on a continent, the currents, the west wind drift, the circumpolar currents. So we'll not get into that. I have given enough hints. If you still wish to attempt this on your own, you can go ahead and submit the answers to me. I'll check it. Okay. So don't worry about this kid. So basically, I'll try to make it as lucid and as simple as possible. So here I have to demonstrate what exactly is happening. This may look a bit complicated, but basically if I so this you can see this red portion indicates the surface water circulation. So here you can see this Gulf Stream from Florida and the Gulf of Mexico, this Gulf Stream, the Florida current, then it takes a northeastward turn from Cape Hatteras, if you remember some of the places, important places, then it gets into breaks into multiple branches. One important is the Northwest Atlantic Drift, which makes these frozen parts relatively ice free and moderates the temperature. And one is the North Atlantic current. Then it converts into the Canary current and the Guinea current, and this North Atlantic gyre is formed. You should remember this term. So basically, and this blue part indicates the subsurface or the deep oceanic circulation. So what exactly is happening? I'll also show you a 3D diagram. So what is happening? This warm salty waters are being carried from the tropical Atlantic Ocean to the North Atlantic Ocean, the northern latitudes, where the warm salty water is cooled due to melting of ice. It increases in density, it sinks, and then the subsurface flow, it brings the water back. So it is playing the AMOC, or in this case, just consider AMOC as a type of synonymous with currents. So they are playing a huge role in moderating and maintaining the overall global heat budget. That is why these, along with the prevailing winds, are one of the important reasons why the poles are not getting colder from the current scenario, and the tropics are being prevented from getting hotter by the time. Okay. So this is the thing. Now you know various currents. If in the exam such a question comes, we'll discuss sample question also. So you don't need to remember this complicated diagram. You can just draw the Atlantic Ocean and you can mention the major currents like Florida current, Cayenne current, then we have the Gulf Stream, the North Atlantic drift, the North Atlantic current. You basically show a gyre of these currents. Then we have the Labrador current, the Erminger current, the East Greenland current, West Greenland current. So you can Norwegian current. You can mention all this. So this is just for the sake of understanding. So here I have written specific term conveyor belt. So you can see if you can imagine if we keep a luggage over this, so it is carried. So similarly, the heat, the balance, the nutrient cycle, this is responsible not only for maintaining the climatic balance but also maintaining the balance or sustaining the ecological biodiversity and the marine species. Okay, so this is the importance. Now, in the news, why I was talking, why it is very important that this circulation, again, due to global warming and the overall term climate change, this has observed a slowdown. That is, although this space does not exactly delineate or demonstrate the exact pace of the movement, but that pace of movement or transportation of heat from the tropics to the poles and the cool water from the poles to the tropics has slowed down. So it is predicted that the scientists have studied that it might collapse in the future, either by the end of the century or later. But studies are still going on. But we have to study from the point of view of mains what this situation or scenario, this slowing down or potential collapse of the AMOC brings to the table. Fine. So I showed you the 2D diagram, but we were not able to understand what is happening beneath, although we have already studied. So here you can see it is a 3D diagram. So what exactly is happening here? So you can see if I, so this is the North American This is the eastern part, northeastern part of North America. Okay, you know, Nova Scotia, okay, Newfoundland, and this is that structure. These are the Baffin Islands, Hudson Bay. So this is the Gulf of Mexico. Even I was not able to comprehend at first, but okay. So this is the Gulf of Mexico. Then this we encounter. This is the South America, this Yucatan Peninsula, and this is the Greenland. Okay, overseas territory of Denmark. So here you can see that this Gulf stream coming from the Gulf of Mexico, it travels towards the north in the form of small currents. See, these ocean currents are not just fast moving bodies or cumulative constituents of water. They consist of minor rotating constituents known as eddies. But later on that, this basically this Gulf Stream is transporting the warm water. Here, heat loss is taking place. Fresh water, the ice is melting, it is increasing because cold water is heavier. So it is cooling this water. The water is sinking, and due to the difference or the gradient between the temperatures, it is then moving towards the southern latitudes. The the cold water. So this is what is important, which is driving one of the major driving forces of AMOC. It is like a conveyor belt. Now, if I try to explain the same diagram, why it is on the brink of collapse or why it is deteriorating or why it is much in news, because now what is happening, we all know that this global warming is leading to melting of ice. So there is fresh water already. There is a decrease in the amount of frozen water, that is ice, but increase in fresh water because the ice is melting. So that cold water is spreading all throughout this Atlantic Ocean. Okay, and so that warm, it is occupying the space which was earlier occupied by the warm water, and because the water has now spread, this warm water, warm salty water, will not get enough cooling. It will not get cooled enough to sink and then continue this gyre or cycle. So this is what exactly is happening, because in order for movement, whether it be heat, we need a high level or a low level. Wind moves from high pressure to low pressure. Heat gets conducted from a body at higher temperature to a body at low temperature. But this excess melting and spread of the fresh water is inhibiting the movement of the warm Gulf waters towards the northern latitudes and preventing its sinking. So it does, this is disrupting or slowing down the conveyor belt. Obviously, some still now the AMOC has not collapsed completely. So some or the other amount of circulation still it is moving. It has not completely become warm. There is some temperature difference which is still sustaining, but that pace has slowed. This is what we have to keep in mind. So crucial ocean current system which helps regulate the climate and weather patterns in northern hemisphere, particularly in Europe and North America. But not only this, it has wide reaching influence extending as far as to the Indian monsoon or the Indian subcontinent, which we'll discuss next. The potential collapse of AMOC. So we have already discussed one aspect, that the because of the collapse of the AMOC, the transportation and subsequent bringing of cold ocean water from the high latitudes to the tropical Atlantic Ocean, that will subside. So that is a crucial role. So greater precipitation. Now, because the ice is melting, global warming, it has been observed that the area around Greenland is receiving relatively greater precipitation along with the melting, rapid melting of the Greenland ice sheet. Fine. So that is slowing down, we have already discussed. Fine. Then potential collapse. Some scientists predict, or some research papers have predicted, that it might collapse by as soon as 2050. But again, IPCC, or the Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, it in its sixth ARC report, it said that assessment report, it said that it might not collapse until the end of the 21st century. So there are still a lot of studies, lot of discrepancies, because climate is something which, if we only consider AMOC, and we consider, okay, like we discussed in one of the earlier sessions, that if the global warming is temperatures are increasing, so that means more evaporation. That should consequently consequently affect higher precipitation, but that is not so, because with global warming, not only is the evaporation increasing, but the capacity or the ability of the atmosphere to hold water, that is also increasing, so it will hold water for a longer amount of time. And because of the lessening of the thermal gradient, why do monsoon winds occur? Why do we observe the monsoon season? Right now, we are in the major phase of the monsoon season. So basically, there the if this if this is the Indian Peninsula, so here we have high pressure conditions, and here we have low pressure conditions. Why? Because during the summer season, this Indian subcontinent, especially the Tibetan plateau, was it was intensely heated, and this attracted the relatively cold water, the winds from the relatively cold oceanic waters towards this. And these winds, they bear moisture as they come from the oceans, and they cause rainfall. Now, if the oceans are also getting hotter, if the land is also getting hotter, so the temperature gradient is decreasing between the oceans and the land. Some might say the land is getting hotter at a faster pace, so it should increase the rainfall tendency. And some might say that because oceans, they accumulate the majority of the heat which is caused due to global warming, the contrast is decreasing. So lesser the thermal gradient, or lesser the contrast, lesser will be the propensity or the probability of intensity of the winds. But actually what is happening, the the erratic nature of the seasons of the monsoon has increased. So either the intensity is very high, flash floods are occurring, cloudbursts are occurring, huge torrential downpour is occurring, or we are experiencing frequently the extended spells of drought. Fine. Then widespread cooling. We have, why widespread cooling? Because the fresh water is now spreading on the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. And less precipitation. Why less precipitation? Because in if we consider the middle European parts, okay, so this is Spain, Portugal, okay, then the Black Sea. So here we have discussed that in the Greenland region, the precipitation has increased. But due to the spread of the cold water, what will happen? Convection will decrease, the air will not rise, the water vapor will not condense. Relatively, it will condense less, and so the precipitation will. And ultimately, what will happen? That food security. It has been found out that this here we have the Britain, the United Kingdom. So here it has been established that the agricultural productivity has been severely affected from now. So because if the crops, if agriculture is being performed in a particular region, it requires a particular specific peculiar type of climate to sustain. Just like we discussed the erratic nature of western disturbances, which hampered in a major way the rabi crops which are grown in Punjab and Haryana. So this is food security. Ultimately, because we are dealing with food shortage, we need sufficient food and sustainable farming practices, and that too catering to the, or conforming to the nutritional capabilities to feed 8 billion people. Okay. Then cascading impact. This is very important. So you might have heard of tipping elements. So there are some ecological phenomena or ecological cycles which are adversely affected by climate change, in particular global warming. For example, the Amazon rainforest, West Antarctic ice sheet, Indian monsoon, and West African monsoon in the Sahel region. So, if, for example, if we talk about Amazon rainforest, what will be its tipping element? How it is a tipping element? We already know that Amazon rainforest is undergoing massive deforestation. There, the land is being cleared, and it is also we have also started observing wildfires or forest fires in a place like Amazon rainforest. Precipitation has been abruptly or adversely affected. And further, if the tree cover in the Amazon rainforest, which are considered to be the lungs of our planet Earth, a time will come when the forest will be unable to replenish itself, and the vegetation which is peculiar, the rainforest, the ebony, mahogany, rosewood trees, which are conspicuous in the Amazon rainforest, that whole biome or that whole vegetation will change. And the precipitation will decrease, so it will not be able to sustain the rainforest biome. It will slowly adopt the scrubland or the savanna biome. And tipping element, if we increase the temperature or remove the tree cover from the Amazon rainforest to such an extent that it will not it cannot be brought back, then we have tipped, we have crossed that threshold. So we'll discuss some more examples here. Okay, so these are the examples. So here you can see Amazon. So that tipping element, there are major 9 tipping elements. So we'll discuss 4 or 5. AMOC, collapse of AMOC is one of the important tipping elements. Just remember. So Amazon dieback. So you can already see that this Amazon rainforest, this spans almost 9 countries in South America, and this red portions, these are now showing the total deforestation. Earlier, if we go back decades, so this entire portion was green. Now, so here we can see some of the areas, an example of Bilam in Brazil. So this is an example of how the deforestation has occurred. Now, how is deforestation is again acting as a feedback loop. We have discussed in the past also how it is acting as a feedback loop. It's not only that climate change or deforestation is causing this loss, the deforestation also leads to the release of carbon in the atmosphere, and it affects the precipitation also. If less precipitation is causing the Amazon dieback, the deforestation or the less number of trees are also leading to decrease in precipitation. How? You might have heard of evapotranspiration. So there are small pores, if you remember your biology NCRT in class 9th or 10th. There are small pores known as stomata in the leaves. So these stomata, they open and close to exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen. And due to their release, due to their opening, water is also converted into water vapor and it evaporates into the atmosphere. So this is known as transpiration. So both evaporation and transpiration, the combined term we call evapotranspiration, and this evapotranspiration is majorly responsible for the precipitation all across planet Earth. Fine. Now, one example, not to make it complicated, I'll just discuss in brief. Now, if the trees are less, there will be less evapotranspiration, there will be less moisture, so rainfall will be less. One of the important things which are now is now happening in the northeastern part of India also, the erratic nature of the rainfall. Moreover, the carbon dioxide. the carbon dioxide will not go into detail, it will become complicated, but this carbon dioxide is increasing. So some people say that it should increase the amount of photosynthesis also. But that photosynthesis, even if it is increased, that will lead to the excess carbon dioxide, it will lead to the closing of the stomatal pores and it will lead to less evapotranspiration. So these are interconnected. Okay. And how dieback, again, how AMOC is affecting this? AMOC, basically, since it is leading to the melting of ice, so the tropical, the equator passes here. So the tropical, this is the Atlantic Ocean, tropical Atlantic Ocean. So due to the collapse of the AMOC, the heat will be trapped here. It will not be transferred as effectively as it was being transferred before the collapse of the AMOC. So this increased warming will lead to the dryness. It might cause along with deforestation, drought like conditions, arid conditions, and it can transform this rainforest entirely. Okay, so this is one of the things. So I'm trying to make it interesting, but don't go into depth. Then one of the tipping elements again is the West African monsoon. So monsoon, although the major that the monsoon, the seasonal reversal of winds, we usually associate with the Indian subcontinent, but the Western African part is also affected by the monsoon. So here also, this is the equator. So the western part, this is the Western Africa, the yellow boundary, and this basically this red, which is of important, this is known as the Sahel region. You might have heard of it in news several times. So this Sahel region is a type of transitional region between the arid or the desert landscape of Sahara and the equatorial rainforest or savanna region. Here we have savanna region also. So basically this is an area of semi-arid grasslands or scrublands. It's a transitional vegetation. Fine. So now the Sahel region, just for information, it extends from this is Senegal all the way to Eritrea. And the countries you know, Mauritania, Mali, Chad, Niger, Sudan. Okay. So we have this. Now what happens is again due to the one of the effects, cascading effects or climatic ripples of the collapse, potential collapse of AMOC. Currently in the winter season, the dry winds they move from land to sea. But in June to September, the direction of these winds get transformed 180 degrees, just like in the case of Indian subcontinent. They assume a southwesterly direction, that is, they come from the southwest. So they bring rainfall in this Sahel region. But again, due to the warming, again this is a tropical Atlantic Ocean region. So due to the warming, it is predicted that this may further enhance the drought or the aridity in this region. But again, another way to look at it is that the increased warmth increase the amount of moisture also. So it might lead to either drought like conditions or it might lead to further precipitation region which might bring about greening of the soil region. So both aspects need to be considered. There is no one aspect or one particular conclusion about climatic phenomena. Then this Antarctic ice sheet is always in the news now or again. So this WAIS, the West Antarctic ice sheet disintegration, this part, this entire west of this entire part is the West Antarctic ice sheet. This is the Antarctic Peninsula. Here you can see this is this region. This is South America, and here we have Africa. Here we have Australia. So this is how it looks. Normally in the 2D maps, there is a flat piece of land which is drawn, but it is not so. So there are some important ice shelf. Ice shelf is different from glaciers. Ice shells are basically, these are cumulative quantities of ice which float in the ocean, but they are attached to the continent or the coast. They are fed by the glaciers. So this white part is actually the glacier part, and this light blue part, these are actually the ice shelves which are fed by this glacier. So this ice shelf, you might have heard, Larsen ice shelf. This has deteriorated massively. Okay. Here we have the Pine Island Glacier. This glacier is always in the news. Thwaites Glacier. And here are ice shelves. One of that ice shelf is the Thwaites ice shelf. So this is also in the news due to collapse or disintegration or high melting. Okay, this is the Ron ice shelf. Okay, this is the Ross ice shelf and this is the Ross Sea. Okay, this is the Amundsen Sea. So some of the things you should. So basically, again, because the warming is taking place, the AMOC is collapsing, so that heat will be transferred to this as far south to to these lower latitudes near the South Pole, and it can prolong or it can initiate a rapid melting of these glaciers or ice sheets. And finally, Indian monsoon shift, because we have already discussed in brief. The here this is a map also given in the NCRT, so it is demonstrating the onset period. For example, 1st June, Kerala, then by 15 July, it covers all of the Indian country. And this again due to the difference in the monsoon, the winds are moving from sea to land, and this erratic nature of the monsoon is increasing as we have seen. And this further, I showed you the entire conveyor belt consisting of the AMOC. So this has far reaching climatic impacts in the Indian subcontinent also. Fine. So this is to summarize. You can just pause the video here. So this is a domino effect. Like these are tipping elements. Like in domino effect, what happens is if we that if there are sticks and we just push one, and then it starts collapsing the other element. So it is tipping elements are like that. Okay, or you can compare it with the Jenga blocks also. So if we keep pulling out one part of the block and keep piling them over the top, one point will come when the balance or the foundation will collapse completely. Okay, so obviously we have to, the conclusion is we have to engage in interventions. The Greek god Poseidon, this god of the sea, cannot save us. So we have discussed always in the news adoption of electric vehicles, fossil fuels, but their social intervention elements are also important. The overall attitude or perception of the public. It is not that you destroy a Banksy painting or you spray paint or colors or water over paintings which or you block traffic to make people listen to you. It's not that way. You should adopt these social interventions. Okay, so like removing fossil fuel subsidies, incentivizing decentralized energy generation means that energy generation where it is occurring at the source, there only the processing plants are located. Then building carbon neutral cities. This is the main um, phenomena we are working on. Divesting from assets linked to fossil fuels, the mining, coal and petroleum extraction plants, revealing the moral implications. So initially you should be aware what damage you are causing to the climate, not only the AMOC, on a large scale, strengthening climate education and engagement. Okay, so this we'll discuss a sample question how to approach this. So, what do you understand by the Atlantic, this AMOC, and discuss its role in affecting? So, it looks quite straightforward, but we don't have to engage or give all the climatic ripples example. We just have to give a good introduction, then divide the body in two parts and given a suitable or apt conclusion. So, basically, you can start like this that by defining the AMOC, that this is a system of oceanic circulation or currents that helps in maintaining the overall climatic as well as ecological balance. Fine. Then you may write some points. So basically this involves the transport of warm salty water from the tropical Atlantic Ocean to the high latitudes. Then you can make this diagram. Like I said, simple currents. You can draw the Atlantic Ocean north and draw some gyres and label some currents also. Then the warm Gulf Stream or the salty waters, they encounter the cold ice, ice flows or ice sheets, ice shells. They cool, they become dense, and then they sink. Then this cold water is drawn in the form of an underwater circulation towards the tropical Atlantic Ocean, thereby serving as a climate moderating conveyor belt. Okay, so this you've already understood the topic, how to present it in your own words. So this is one part. Fine. Then in the next part, so role in affecting the weather patterns. So in this part, you have to brainstorm a little, not just so one part, point you can write. It helps in moderating the climate or the weather of the northern part of Atlantic Ocean. It keeps them ice free and sustain the daily livelihood activities. Then ITCZ. You know what ITCZ is? You better know. Intertropical Convergence Zone. Due to the AMOC, because what is happening now due to the global warming and this cool water is spreading, so that ITCZ, which remains mostly north of the equator most of the time of the year, it is also going to shift southwards. That is also going to affect the rainfall patterns and the drought and aridity and the climate ripples. So it helps in maintaining the position of, you can elaborate on these points also. Position of ITCZ, which in turn mandates or sustains the intensity or the duration of monsoons, thunderstorms, and other weather phenomena. Then CO2 sequestration. This is very interesting point. The water which is moving to the northern latitudes, it gets cooled, it becomes heavy, it sinks, and along with it, it also carries the carbon dioxide to the bottom layers of the ocean. So it helps in the sequestration and thereby mitigating or balancing out the adverse effects of global warming or the greenhouse gases which are emitted by the fossil fuels. Then we can write one of the most maintenance of ecology. So basically we have downwelling. This is a process of downwelling. There is an upwelling as well. So the cold water or the, in simple words, the transport of the warm salty water and the downwelling as well as the upwelling, it supplies nutrients or planktons, zooplanktons and phytoplanktons to sustain the marine biodiversity, the fish, and the overall ecological balance or the ecosystem, and also sustains the economic activity such as fishing all across the world, the fishing industry. Fine. So this is, and in the conclusion, you can write a fairly, you can innovate or according to what you think. So the, we can write the mechanism, importance, and vulnerabilities of AMOC need to be studied thoroughly in order to prepare ourselves from the impending changes affected due to the climate change, the adverse effects. So, in this way, you can conclude. So, I hope this was a fruitful topic for you. Even if this direct question does not come, question here and there, because ocean, winds, climatology, oceanography, these are very important from the point of view of mains. So, keep calm, keep studying. Till we meet again next time. Jai Hind.